Cass Holt had always been good at reading the silence. It was something every soldier learned early, how to listen to the quiet, the space between explosions, the faintest rustle of an enemy's movement. But today, the silence felt different. It pressed against her skin, a weight that made her skin crawl. She stood in the command center of the last human stronghold on Earth, staring at the hollow screen in front of her. The data from the scout ships was clear, an incoming fleet. But this wasn't a standard assault. This was something more calculated, more dangerous. The Syndicate was deploying their deadliest warriors, alien assassins who had torn through countless worlds. They didn't just kill, they preyed, dismantling civilizations piece by piece, savoring the destruction they wrought. "Prepare for impact," Cass muttered, her voice quiet but firm. Her fingers hovered over the comms, ready to give the order, but something gnawed at her gut. The attack was too precise, too quick. They had been waiting. The Syndicate knew exactly where to strike. The door behind her slid open, and Lieutenant Rail entered, his face pale but determined. "Commander, the enemy fleet is in range. We have maybe 15 minutes before they hit the surface." Cass didn't turn. She already knew the numbers, had already processed the logistics. The rebels had only a fraction of the firepower needed to hold their ground. "What's the status on the new weapons?" Rail hesitated. "The weapons systems are ready, but they're untested." Cass finished for him, her voice biting. "I know. I don't need the but. If we're going to survive this, we need them operational. We can't rely on them just yet, Cass. They're experimental. We don't know what'll happen when we fire them. It could be worse than. Worse than being slaughtered in our own homes?" Cass snapped, turning toward him now. Her eyes were sharp, her face set in a mask of stoic determination. "We don't have the luxury of time, Lieutenant. The Syndicate won't stop until every last human is dead. If we don't fight now, we lose everything. And I'm not ready to lose. Not yet." Rail met her gaze, his lips tightening, but he said nothing. He had seen that look in her eyes before, the same resolve that had carried her through countless battles, through losses that would have broken lesser men. But this time, even Cass felt a twinge of doubt. This wasn't a regular raid. This was an execution. "Get the teams ready," she said. "I'll head to the command center. Start the countdown for the weapons." As Rail left, Cass moved quickly through the compound, her boots making the usual rhythmic thud against the cold metal floors. The hum of the station's emergency lights and the occasional hiss of malfunctioning systems were the only sounds in the hollow silence of the hallway. Even the usual chatter from her comrades seemed absent, as if they, too, knew what was coming. When she reached the weapons bay, her team was already in position, suited up in their combat armor. Sergeant Tanis, a burly man with a grim smile, turned as she entered. "Ready to do this, Commander?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Cass nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be. The Syndicate's warriors are coming, and we've got one shot. We make it count." Tanis grinned, but there was no humor in it, only the hard edge of someone who had seen too many battles to laugh now. "I'll make sure they regret ever stepping foot on Earth." The weapons bay was filled with the hum of equipment powering up, and the technicians worked swiftly, checking systems and calibrating targets. But Cass knew it was all a distraction from the real truth. Their enemies weren't just coming, they had already arrived. She could feel it in her bones. "All systems are online," one of the techs called out, his voice strained. "Targeting systems calibrated. We can launch whenever you give the word." Cass took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Do it," she said simply. Outside, the world trembled as the first wave of Syndicate forces made contact with Earth's atmosphere. The ground shook violently, debris falling from overhead as shockwaves rippled through the air. From the comms, the sounds of battle erupted, gunfire, explosions, screams, echoing like a symphony of death. But Cass didn't flinch. She had long since hardened herself against the sounds of war. She moved toward the control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys to activate the launch sequence. The screen in front of her flashed, and a map of the planet appeared, showing the Syndicate's forces landing in a dozen hot zones. Launch sequence confirmed, the tech said, his voice tight. We've got a lock on the target. Firing in 3, 2, 1. A brilliant flash of light lit up the sky. The first missile, an experimental ion-based weapon, shot through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of fire behind it. Cass watched the countdown clock tick down, her heart pounding. The weapon would only work if they hit the right spot, the Syndicate's primary staging area. If they missed, they'd have no backup. And then it happened. The missile struck. A massive explosion blossomed across the horizon, turning the sky into a firestorm. Cass couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was a start. The Syndicate had just lost one of their key points of operation. Direct hit! Someone shouted, but Cass barely heard them. Her mind was already racing ahead. The Syndicate would retaliate, and they would retaliate hard. She had no illusions about that. And then came the sound she had been dreading, an incoming transmission from the Syndicate. Humanity, the voice said, cold and regal. You have been foolish. You've killed our soldiers, but you've only awoken the fury of our greatest warriors. You will not survive. The transmission cut off, and Cass felt a chill creep down her spine. The voice wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The Syndicate's deadliest killers were coming. And they would be looking for her. Ready the evac ships, Cass ordered, her voice low, but ironclad. We fight until the last. No retreat. No surrender. Her team assembled around her, their faces set in grim resolve. There was no room for doubt now, only action. As the ground beneath them shook again, Cass took a final breath. The war was just beginning. The shuttle shook violently as it descended toward the surface. Cass Holt gripped the straps tightly, the motion of the ship doing little to calm the storm raging in her chest. They had struck the Syndicate's first blow, now they were waiting for the retaliatory strike. The few remaining rebel forces, desperate and thinly stretched, were preparing for an assault that they knew they couldn't fully win. But they had no choice. The fight was coming for them. Cass glanced over at her team, each of them tense, their faces painted with the strain of the endless battle they had been fighting for years. Sergeant Tanis sat in the corner, his fingers drumming on his rifle, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Behind him, Private Lila and Corporal Jace were checking their gear, double-checking their weapons, the steady clink of metal a comforting reminder of their preparation. Landing in 5. The pilot's voice crackled through the comms, calm but strained. The tone was the same one you'd hear on a regular patrol, but everyone knew that this wasn't any ordinary mission. This was a one-way ticket. The Syndicate had come with its deadliest killers. And they would stop at nothing to ensure humanity's extinction. Cass shifted in her seat, pulling her helmet over her head. The weight of it, the familiar feeling of the cold metal against her skin, was a relief. A comfort in the face of impending chaos. She felt herself shutting down, preparing her mind for the battlefield. But there was a gnawing at the back of her mind, a question she couldn't quite silence. Could they win? As the shuttle broke through the thick clouds, the barren wasteland of Earth stretched below them, cracked landscapes, shattered buildings, and the distant plumes of smoke from ongoing skirmishes. The once vibrant world was now a graveyard of humanity's pride. Cass had never thought she'd see Earth like this, a shadow of its former self. Yet in its ruins she could still feel the pulse of the fight. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot's voice broke into her thoughts. Brace for impact. The ship jolted violently, and Cass gripped the seat again, her heart pounding as the shuttle hit the surface with a heavy thud. The engine screamed, screeching against the force of the impact. The rear hatch opened, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt ozone and dust. The smell of a dying world. Let's move! Cass barked, her voice cutting through the haze of exhaustion. Without hesitation, the team piled out of the shuttle, weapons raised, scanning the barren terrain. They were in the ruins of what had once been a major human city, the skeletal remains of buildings jutting out from the broken ground like the bones of a long-dead beast. Cass's boots hit the dirt with a muffled thud. She led her team forward, moving swiftly and silently through the desolate streets. The wind howled in their ears, a ghostly cry as they moved deeper into enemy territory. The mission was simple: hold the line, find the Syndicate's forces, and destroy them before they could deploy their deadliest killers. It sounded simple, but Cass knew better. She knew that the Syndicate wasn't just attacking, they were hunting. As they approached a ruined tower, Cass's comms crackled to life again. "Commander Holt," a voice said. It was Harlan, the tech officer stationed back at their hidden base. His voice was thin, anxious. "I've been able to track the Syndicate's advance. They've begun moving their elite warriors toward your position. You're running out of time." Cass clenched her jaw. She'd known this was coming. The Syndicate never acted in half measures. If they were deploying their killers, they were closing in for the kill. "How long?" "Maybe 30 minutes. Less, depending on how fast they're moving. You need to get to the staging ground and stop them before they breach the perimeter." Cass exchanged a quick glance with Tanis. "We don't have 30 minutes. "Understood," Harlan replied, his voice barely audible now as interference crept in. "I'll keep trying to feed you coordinates. But you're on your own for now." The comms cut off abruptly. Cass cursed under her breath. Her plan had always been to strike before they could be found, but it seemed luck wasn't on their side today. They had to move fast, before the Syndicate could finish what they had started. "Tanis," Cass said, her voice steady. "Take point. I'll follow with Jace and Lila. We hit the Syndicate's command post, hard and fast." Tanis nodded sharply. His bulk shifted into motion as he took the lead, moving swiftly and silently through the crumbled buildings. His rifle was raised, eyes scanning every corner, every darkened space where an enemy could hide. "Ready, Commander," Jace said, voice tight with anticipation. Cass looked at Lila. The young private's face was pale, her lips pressed together in a thin line, but her grip on her weapon was firm. She'd never been tested like this before. Cass knew what was at stake. It wasn't just the war. It was the very future of their species. They moved through the wreckage of the city, their boots crunching through broken glass and rubble, avoiding the open areas where they could be exposed. The silence was oppressive, suffocating, and Cass's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Somewhere, in the distance, she could feel the Syndicate closing in, their brutal warriors advancing with deadly efficiency. Suddenly, a screeching roar split the air. It wasn't just the sound of battle. It was something worse. Cass's heart skipped a beat. The Syndicate's assassins had arrived. "Take cover!" she shouted, diving behind a shattered wall as the sound of gunfire erupted. Bullets and energy blasts hissed through the air, slamming into the ruined buildings around them. The Syndicate had sent their killers, and now, they were coming for her squad. Cass's rifle roared to life, the weapon barking in the silence of the ruined city. Her shots were precise, each one finding its target as Syndicate soldiers stormed from their positions, their movements fluid and dangerous. Tanis fired with deadly accuracy, cutting down 2 of the enemy in a heartbeat. Jace and Lila opened fire, their shots landing on the enemy's armor with a satisfying crack, but it was clear, the Syndicate's killers were not like anything they had faced before. "Fall back!" Cass ordered. The Syndicate's killers weren't just soldiers. They were predators, trained to hunt, to kill with surgical precision. As her team retreated, Cass's mind raced. They had to get to the heart of the Syndicate's operation. If they didn't, Earth would fall, and with it, everything they had fought for. They had started this war to protect humanity. Now, it was time to finish it. And she would do whatever it took to make sure humanity wasn't erased from the stars. The ground trembled again. The Syndicate wasn't just coming, they were here. And they wouldn't stop until every last one of them was dead. Cass's boots hit the cracked pavement with a heavy thud as she sprinted through the darkened streets, the roar of the Syndicate's soldiers fading into the background. Her team was trailing behind, moving swiftly but silently, their weapons ready. Each breath Cass took burned in her lungs, but she pushed through it, the taste of desperation on her tongue. They were running out of time. The Syndicate's killers were relentless, hunting, tracking, waiting to finish what had been started. "Where's the command post?" Tanis barked from behind her, his voice tight. "2 clicks west," Cass replied, her mind focused on the path ahead. "We're almost there. Keep your eyes open." The city around them was a ghost of its former self, burned-out shells of buildings, twisted metal, and shattered glass. The signs of battle were everywhere, but the war was far from over. The Syndicate's assassins weren't just soldiers. They were predators, and they were closing in fast. Cass's heart pounded in her chest as the adrenaline coursed through her veins. This wasn't just another mission. This was the turning point. "Cass, we've got company." Lila's voice broke through the comms, her tone urgent. "Multiple signatures coming our way." Cass didn't hesitate. "Tanis, cover the rear. We're not stopping." The squad fell into formation without question. Cass led the way, keeping her pace steady, eyes scanning every shadow, every alley. They had no choice now but to keep moving forward. If they stopped, they would be picked off, one by one. The Syndicate's elite were too skilled to let anyone escape. They had to hit the command post and cripple the Syndicate's ability to strike back. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, low but deliberate. Cass's breath caught in her throat. The hunters were getting closer. "Take cover!" Cass ordered, diving behind the remnants of a collapsed wall. Her team followed suit, dropping into the shadows just as the first of the Syndicate's killers appeared, a towering figure clad in dark, sleek armor, its helmet adorned with twisted, angular markings. The figure's movements were fluid, almost predatory, scanning the surroundings with sharp, deliberate motions. Cass held her breath. The assassin didn't see them. Not yet. "Lila, get a shot," Cass whispered. Lila raised her rifle slowly, her focus unwavering. The shot was crisp, fast, and clean, but the assassin dodged with preternatural speed, moving faster than Cass could track. "Shit!" Lila cursed as the assassin closed in on their position, its energy blade flashing to life, casting an eerie glow in the darkness. "Get ready!" Cass shouted. She swung out from behind cover, opening fire. The sound of gunfire filled the air, a symphony of destruction. But it wasn't enough. The assassin was too fast, too agile. It deflected the shots with ease, moving like a shadow. Tanis fired, his shots hitting the assassin's side armor, causing it to stagger, but the creature recovered instantly, its cold, lifeless eyes locked onto Cass. The assassin's voice was calm, almost indifferent as it spoke, its words a mockery of humanity's fragile existence. "You cannot win. The Syndicate is inevitable. Your species will fall." Cass's hand tightened around her rifle. She could feel her heart pounding, but there was no fear in her chest. Only fire. "You talk too much," she said, her voice low, steady. "Time to die." With a fluid motion, Cass dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The shot rang out, striking the assassin's exposed neck. The creature fell to the ground, its body twitching, convulsing for a moment before it went still. "Target down," Tanis said, his voice tight with satisfaction, but there was no time to revel in the victory. "Move!" Cass shouted, already running, the sound of more enemies approaching. The assassin's comrades weren't far behind, and they would be more dangerous. They reached the edge of the command post just as the first wave of enemy reinforcements arrived. More Syndicate killers, more of the same merciless efficiency. Cass's pulse quickened, but she didn't slow down. They had to break through and get to the core of the Syndicate's operations. "Grenade!" Tanis shouted. The explosion rocked the ground beneath them, sending debris flying in every direction. The Syndicate soldiers staggered, their armor damaged, their formations broken. Cass didn't hesitate. She charged forward, her rifle blazing. A heavy gunfight erupted, the sound of weapons fire filling the air. Cass moved with precision, her every shot finding its mark. She could hear Tanis yelling, Lila's breathless orders over the comms, but all she could focus on was the target ahead, the heart of the Syndicate's stronghold. "Hold the line!" Cass shouted as they fought their way through the compound. The enemy soldiers were numerous, but they were no match for the desperation and fury of the rebels. One by one they dropped. But the Syndicate's killers kept coming, their resolve unyielding. "Cass!" Lila called, her voice strained. "We're running out of ammo!" Cass didn't flinch. "We fight with what we've got. We're almost there." The air grew thicker with the scent of smoke and blood. The echoes of battle raged around them as they pushed deeper into the compound. But just as they reached the central command hub, a new threat emerged from the shadows. A larger figure, even more imposing than the previous assassins, stepped into the doorway. Its helmet was decorated with intricate, alien patterns, and its body was encased in the heaviest armor yet. The creature's hands crackled with energy, a weapon of pure destruction at its side. Cass's stomach dropped. This wasn't just another assassin. This was the Syndicate's leader, the one they had been saving for last. The one who would finish humanity off for good. "You're too late," the figure said, its voice a guttural growl that echoed in the room. "You are all dead." Cass took a step forward, her rifle aimed directly at the alien leader. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her resolve was iron. "Not today," she said and fired. The blast collided with the leader's armor, but it only staggered back slightly. The alien raised its weapon, and for a moment, Cass thought she saw the finality of her own death. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding flash of light erupted, and the leader's weapon exploded in a shower of sparks. Cass's eyes narrowed. The cavalry had arrived. "Harlan?" she whispered, barely believing it. "Just in time." Harlan's voice came through the comms, crackling with static. "We've got your back, Commander." The Syndicate leader snarled and raged. "No! You will fall like all the others!" The final battle had begun. But for the first time in years, Cass felt a flicker of hope. The tide was turning. The blast from the Syndicate leader's weapon tore through the air, sending shockwaves through the compound. Cass's heart skipped a beat as the energy pulse veered dangerously close, but then, a bright flare of blue light exploded in the space between them. The alien leader's weapon sputtered and died in a burst of sparks. For a fleeting moment, everything went still. "Now!" Cass shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. Her team sprang into action without hesitation. Tanis and Jace opened fire on the alien leader, their shots a relentless barrage. Cass's breath was steady as she lined up her own shot, aiming at the weak points in the leader's armor. Her finger squeezed the trigger, and the shot rang true, slamming into the alien's side, but it barely staggered the creature. The armor was thick, nearly impenetrable. The alien leader roared, its voice like a storm in a cavern. The ground trembled beneath them as it charged forward, its weapon crackling with deadly energy once again. Cass dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast that scorched the ground where she had been standing moments before. "Fall back!" Cass shouted, but the words were drowned out by the chaos. The Syndicate leader's advance was unstoppable, its massive form a force of nature. It moved with terrifying speed, like a hunter closing in on its prey. Cass's mind raced. The Syndicate's elite warriors were too much for them. If they couldn't break through the leader's defenses, they would all be dead in minutes. She needed a plan. Something, anything, to turn the tide. She glanced to her left. Lila was down, pinned under the leader's fire. Her eyes were wide with pain, but she was still breathing. "Tanis!" Cass yelled, her voice sharp. "Cover me!" Without waiting for a response, she sprinted toward the downed soldier. Her rifle was still clutched in her hand, but she knew she couldn't rely on it. Not anymore. She had to think outside the box. She reached Lila's side just as another blast from the leader's weapon sent a wave of heat across her face. "Lila!" Cass shouted, kneeling next to her, pulling her behind cover. Lila groaned but managed to push herself up with Cass's help. "We need to get to the console," Cass said, pointing toward the central command hub. "That's our only shot." Lila nodded weakly, but the pain in her eyes was evident. "I'm with you, Commander." The two of them staggered toward the central console, each step a test of willpower. Cass's mind never stopped working, calculating every movement, every moment. The Syndicate leader's assault was relentless, but it wasn't invincible. Cass knew the leader's armor had weak points. She just needed to find them. Cass! Tanis's voice crackled through the comms, tense. We can't hold out much longer. You need to end this now. The urgency in his voice pushed Cass forward, even though every part of her screamed to wait, to give Lila a moment to recover. But there was no time. She had to finish it. They all had to. They reached the command console, and Cass slammed her palm against the activation panel. The system hummed to life, and a digital map appeared on the screen. The Syndicate's forces were still advancing on their position, but the console displayed a weak point, the control relay that would deactivate the leader's armor systems, a vulnerability Cass hadn't known about before. It's now or never, Cass muttered under her breath. She turned to Lila, her face a mask of grim determination. Stay down. I'm going in. Lila managed a weak nod, still clutching her side, the blood seeping through her fingers. Cass didn't wait for another second. She sprinted toward the center of the room, drawing the attention of the alien leader. Come on, you bastard! Cass whispered, aiming her rifle at the armored giant. Let's see what you've got. The Syndicate leader charged, its weapon crackling with destructive energy. Cass ducked just in time, feeling the searing heat of the blast as it scorched the air above her. The leader's hulking frame loomed over her, but Cass didn't hesitate. She dove between its legs, slamming into the ground, rolling toward its exposed side. The leader turned too slowly, its massive hands swiping at the air, but Cass was already there. She knew this moment was her only chance. She pulled a grenade from her belt, an EMP charge designed for situations just like this. Goodbye, Cass muttered as she primed the grenade. She hurled it straight at the leader's exposed circuitry. Time seemed to slow as the grenade sailed through the air, landing on the exposed panel beneath its chest. The leader screamed, its entire body convulsing as the EMP burst to life. A surge of electricity shot through the creature, and for the first time, the alien leader faltered. Its weapon sputtered, sparks flying, and it staggered back, its armor losing power. Now! Cass shouted. Tanis and Jace unleashed everything they had. The barrage of bullets, laser fire, and explosive rounds tore into the weakened leader. The alien tried to raise its weapon one last time, but it was too late. Cass's team pushed forward, pouring every ounce of firepower into the leader's exposed joints. Finally, with a deafening roar, the Syndicate leader fell, its massive form crumpling to the ground in a heap of broken metal and twitching limbs. The room went silent except for the hum of the dying systems and the heavy breathing of Cass and her team. We did it, Tanis said, voice filled with disbelief. We actually did it. Cass stood over the fallen leader, her chest rising and falling with every breath, but her mind was still spinning. This was a victory. But it felt like a hollow one. The Syndicate was vast, and this leader was only one of many. Cass knew they hadn't won the war, not yet. But they had taken down the beast, the one they had feared most. Suddenly, the comms crackled again, Harlan's voice urgent. Cass, listen, there's something you need to know. Cass's heart skipped. What is it? The Syndicate's real weapon, Asterisk, the one they've been building, Asterisk. It's not here, Harlan said. It's on a ship, heading for the last human colony on Mars. They're going to wipe it out. Cass felt the blood drain from her face. No. Not Mars. She looked around at her team, battle-worn, exhausted, but alive. And in that moment, Cass made a decision. Prepare the ship, she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. We're not stopping. Mars is next. Her team nodded, and Cass felt the fire inside her reignite. This war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They had won victory, but now they had a new mission, one that would change everything. The Syndicate had underestimated humanity. They had made a mistake. And Cass Holt would make sure they'd regret it.